my greatest Super Bowl pool ever. I accept Visa, Amex, PayPal, or Bitcoin. Hi everyone, this is Will O'Toole for another edition of Park Ridge Sports History. Thank you for inviting me into your home. This week I would like to talk all things Super Bowl, but from a number of perspectives. One is television, advertising, culture, and of course the game itself. I want to delve in specifically to the quarterbacks, the head players of each team, and their role in the Super Bowl and how that has affected their Hall of Fame career. Once again, I'd like to have a shout out to Howard Fredericks. He loves, and I really do appreciate it, he loves all my ideas, and of course, we're always on the same page. I think he knew. He didn't even have to bother sending me an email this week about Super Bowl, but last week I really thought we were on the same wavelength talking about Henry Aaron and the greatness of Aaron. Anyway, so a shout out to Howard, and a special thanks for having me into your homes each week. The Super Bowl ratings, or the Super Bowl in general. Yeah, I know. I put the cartoon of, and everybody knows that chart. Most people probably know that chart better than they do their mortgage or their checkbook or even all of the sections and articles of the Constitution. But the reason I love doing Super Bowl cartoons, not just it gives me a whole week, really a plethora of issues to attack, not just or just even cover. Not just the game itself, but things that go on in our culture about it, because it has become more of just a game. I would say fairly it is another American, it's another American holiday, although it's not looked at as a holiday. I really believe that it has become, it's gone from a game that in 1967, when it was first played, after the 66 season, and had a rating of 51. It has gone now through the roof and doubled that viewership over 100, because it has become an event for winter. And I like to look at it this way. Halloween probably is the gateway holiday into the real holidays that we have in the United States, where we get together with family and friends. And I'm talking about Thanksgiving, the Christmas holidays, Hanukkah, New Year's, and then the Super Bowl. And I think that the Super Bowl winds up the festivities, because it's about 6 weeks after Christmas, but it's in the heart of winter. And I think most people look at it, it's our last get together before we really have to reach out and get used to winter's brutal clutch and grip on us. And as soon as that game ends, I know I am, but I'm sure there are many more just like me, or just that really starts counting down to spring training, which is usually 2 weeks after the Super Bowl, and then to the warm weather of spring. But it has become an event. Fans gather, usually at one person's home. It allows the people like me who have given up, usually are on a diet during the Christmas, right after New Year's, the resolution to lose some weight. And there I am. And it allows me to have all the things I'm not allowed to have. And I enjoy the game as the game. I know there are people who enjoy the game from the standpoint of the pool, who normally wouldn't know what teams are playing, but boy, oh boy, they get involved with the pool, and it's a fun thing. I just never win. And of course, anybody who doesn't know what the Super Bowl pool is, basically you give a couple of dollars, you put your name in the box. It's 100 boxes, represent all the numbers from 0 to 9 for both teams. And then after the boxes are filled, they randomly pick numbers, and then you are assigned numbers. So for instance, if it was Team A and I got the number 1, and then for Team B, I got the number 4, those numbers would represent the last digit in their score for the game. So in other words, if I got 1-4, I'd be kind of happy because I could win 21-14 if the 1 was on the winning side. So let's say Seattle had the 1, and let's say Oakland had the 4. If that Super Bowl, the score ended 21-14, and I had 1-4, hey, I win a few bucks in the pool. For me, I think I've won once. I usually get these numbers, and for the non-football fans, these are not good numbers to get. 8-8, 9-9. One year I had the 8-9. I had the 8 for the AFC team, and I had the 9. No, I had the 8 for the NFC team, and I had the 9 for the AFC team. Well, that happened to be the year that the Raiders from LA defeated the Redskins from Washington 38-9. I had the right numbers, but with the wrong team, I lost. But it is a good way to get the non-football fans involved. It is a good way to get the football fans whose teams aren't involved in the game. And it's just a fun way because there are only going to be tops maybe 4 or 5 winners through the night with the pool. But you just sit there, and I just love listening to the loser stories. You know, if they didn't score 3 seconds before half, I would have had the numbers right. I would have won the second quarter. I love listening to those stories of the almost, but they didn't. And that's what makes the Super Bowl pool so much fun. And how do I know the game has grown? And look, I'm going to give you some numbers. I used Wikipedia and Football Reference for my 2 sources. Wikipedia, I just kind of use as an early source, and then I usually go to other sources as well. But for the main part, I'm just going to use Wikipedia with the average viewers and ratings. I have to be very honest with you. I don't understand the ratings formulas or the average viewership, but I can read numbers this way. And obviously, the higher the number, the better that the Super Bowl is doing in terms of viewership and in terms of the TV rating. But I found this interesting because I think there are most fans that know that the first Super Bowl was not sold out. And it was held in LA at the Coliseum between the Green Bay Packers and Kansas City Chiefs. The game was not sold out. And for many football fans, I think they thought going to the game that it was going to be just a bloodbath, that it wasn't going to be all that exciting. Now, unfortunately, I think those tickets cost for the first game $7 average. You can't get a drink or a souvenir at a Super Bowl for $7 today. So most of the regular fans stay at home and watch the game. The Super Bowl has become an event for corporate people, for celebrities. Even at the first one, if you take a look at some of those highlights of the game, you'll see many Hollywood celebrities in the stands. And what's interesting, too, and I talk about this with my students, it's interesting how football, when fans went to the game, they went in a suit and tie. Today they go brandishing their favorite team's jersey, either home, away, retro, or whatever, or multicolor, whatever it is. But most fans go to the game in jerseys now. When I was a kid, you went to these events and you were dressed in a suit and tie. And how do I know that? Take a look at that 67 Super Bowl. Fans are dressed in a coat and tie. And the women are dressed in dresses. They're not dressed in the jerseys. So that, you could say, well, we kind of miss that in our culture. I do like when the fans dress in the jerseys. It's kind of cool too. So I'm kind of torn either way. But just knowing that you would dress up like that, I think people saw going to the game as a major event. And certainly that first Super Bowl proves that out. All right, so the first Super Bowl, and this is the other thing too, that was actually shown on 2 networks, ABC and NBC. I believe that the AFL was originally on ABC, and then the NBC network got its rights. And of course, CBS, for years, the NFL had was broadcast their games on CBS. That year, the ratings were actually split. The NFL, CBS did better than NBC and the AFL, 22-18, but still, it provided over a 40 rating, and viewership was about 50. Now, I think, and I could be wrong on this, I'm just going to say that it's 51.8 was the average viewership. I didn't use actual TV people because, first of all, I don't know what the components are for the viewership, whether you have to spend an exact amount of time in front of the set. Plus, it's kind of skewed too, because I really believe this, and I'm just going to make the argument this way. Anybody who believes, let's just say the number is 51.8, and I think that was total number of people watching the game. I really don't believe that there's only 100 million people watching the game today in the United States. And that's what last year's Super Bowl was. 2020 had 100.45. I could be wrong, and that's why I really don't want to judge all this. But I actually think there are more fans watching the game than they can really figure out. I think it's more than half the country that watches the Super Bowl. How do you know that? Even people with little interest in the game, they watch it. And I've told you why. Family and friends, maybe they get into the Super Bowl pool, and the other things that they're interested in, especially the younger generation. They're interested in the halftime festivities, which has ballooned into a TV show unto itself. You know, the game now is about 5 hours, and I have some real problems with the game being on so late, at least on the East Coast. I get it. You want the biggest viewership you can, but when you're starting the game at 6 o'clock at night, and now it's ending close to 12 and maybe even past 12, they have to start it a little bit earlier. Because I have to be very honest with you. I think the last 15 Super Bowls I have not watched from the first quarter to the gun being signaled to end the game. The only one I recall is a couple of years ago when the Patriots made that unbelievable comeback to defeat the Atlanta Falcons. And I was really more interested in watching that game, surprisingly, than any others, because I never thought that the Patriots are out of it. I didn't think they were necessarily going to win, but because everything was against them, but I didn't give up on them either. And, Patriots go to overtime. Once they went to overtime, I knew it was over. They had no chance, the Falcons. They were drilled in the second half of that game, actually in the the fourth quarter. So that was a pretty exciting game. I did stay up and watch the whole thing. But there are many other games I'm watching the fourth quarter with one eye open in my bed because the game just goes on for too long. That's why I've been saying for a long time, and I know that there is a wave of popularity for this, and that is to move the Super Bowl to President's Day weekend. And the whole big problem was, well, how do you fix that? The NFL wants to add another game. The players are kind of balking at that. They did add another team to the playoffs this year. What my suggestion would be is keep the 16 games. You could actually go into the second week in January. And this is what you could actually do. Instead of just giving one bye week during the season, have them play all through September. Give each team off a week in October, a week in November, and a week in December. And those last 2 weeks, people say it's too cold. Well, they did play the first week in January, the last game of the year. Adding one more is not going to, I think, hurt the league. And if you do want to protect the players and the fans by maybe it being too cold, you could. And I know that they've really made the last couple of weeks that you play within your own division, but you could experiment and say, you know what, we're just going to play in the warm weather sites or in the domes. And then you could adjust your schedule for that last one where everybody's on the road. And then the playoffs, well, home field advantage. The fans have withstood unbelievable cold. And just because you're playing in late January doesn't mean that actually it's going to be any colder than it was in December. I mean, the ice ball, the famous ice ball, was played, I think, on New Year's Eve. It was 15 below zero. So, and listen, it was brutal. That was one of the reasons why Lombardi went for it on fourth down instead of kicking a tying field goal. He said, let's just get out of here. It's so unfair to the fans. And of course, he had the winning combination there. And they would go on to win their second Super Bowl that year. Anyway, you could do that. And then it would be on the weekend, because there is a huge movement towards having that day off. And instead of having it as a national holiday, you could just use President's Weekend and have the Super Bowl kick off President's holiday. And then most people would be off that Monday. Now, advertising, if you don't like the food and you don't like the company and you're not winning your pool, and you don't enjoy the halftime, well, there's always the commercials. And the commercials have become as part of, in fact, I would say that after the game itself, it's the commercials that really hold the interest of the regular fan the most, or the casual fan, because quite simply, it seems that there is quite an interest in the commercials, and there has been a buildup. There has probably been a plateau, and the commercials have gone down a bit. It used to be at one point, I would say in the mid 80s, that the commercials were a be all and end all, and thank heavens they were, because let's face it, there were some tough Super Bowls to get through. I mean, witness the 49ers and their drubbing of the Broncos 55-10. Look at even the Montana Marino game was really 38-16. As I said, the Washington Redskin LA Raider game 38-9. So there were some huge blowouts during those mid 80s. And it made watching the commercials something to look forward to, I would say. And they did a good job. I mean, there have been countless commercials. Interestingly enough, I never realized this. Many of the commercials you never see again. I don't know why that is. I don't know whether, some obviously you did. I think the Apple one back in the early 80s, you saw many of them. But there are other commercials that were just designed for the Super Bowl. It's not my money you're wasting anyway. But I was amazed at this. $42,500 was the price for a 30-second commercial in the first Super Bowl. I thought that was really high. I'd love to speak to an advertising guy at the time, because, you're talking about inflation and all the rest of it. And the fact that the game wasn't a sellout and they didn't know how they were going to do on the ratings. But when you think about it, you got 42,000 and a 41 rating and 50 million people watching. You really got, I would assume you really got a good use of your dollar there. Today, well, it took exactly 19 Super Bowls for the price of a 30-second commercial to get to $500,000 for a 30-second. And it took from 1985, this amazed me, it took 10 years to go from 500,000 to 1.1 million. I was really amazed at that, because I thought that took a long time. As I'm looking at this, I thought it would have been cut in half of that from 500,000, it would have just been skipping a jump to 1 million. But then it took, and this is what amazes me again, it's taken 25 years to go from 1 million. Now it's 5 million. And I know that they brought the price of the 30-second commercial down this year because the ratings for the NFL have gone down. But $5 million for a 30-second commercial in 2020's Super Bowl. Amazing when you think about it. Just amazing. So are you getting a bigger blast for your dollar? I'm not too sure about that. Anyway, but of course there have been some great memorable Super Bowl commercials. So that keeps people either laughing or frowning and saying, that was one of the stupidest ones I've ever seen. I don't know what's more valuable or what is more memorable, the really funny ones or the really terrible ones. I just remember the GoDaddy ones from the last 4 or 5 Super Bowls. The Frito-Lay commercials, they're, but and that's what I mean. I think they've peaked and now they've gone down, and now they have to improve their product there because, like I said, this is the only game of the year where you don't turn off the TV or skip around. You definitely want to watch the commercials. So there it is. There's the culture of the Super Bowl in our life. Even the term Super Bowl as a word has been copyrighted, and anything like Super Sunday or Super Sales has to get approval to be used by the NFL, as they trademarked, I believe, that term super in regards to that. It is amazing how this game, this one event, how a game of 60 minutes has become an event that is really planned around for a few weeks by families and, of course, by the media for years. All right, let's segue to really the fun part, and that is on the field. And I was thinking when I was talking to my students about the first Super Bowl, I showed it to them on highlights of it, and I was really amazed how many Hall of Famers were involved in the first Super Bowl between the Packers and the Chiefs. I mean, you had Buck Buchanan and Willie Lanier. It's amazing. I always put those two guys' names together, probably because they just seem like a double beast to me. Oh, I mean, they do. It's like you can't say Buck Buchanan without saying Willie Lanier, and vice versa. So they had some great players on that side of the ball. Plus, you had Len Dawson and Otis Taylor for the Chiefs. And, of course, Hank Stram becomes a Hall of Fame Super Bowl, Hall of Fame NFL coach, Super Bowl winner. And everyone, if you've ever seen the highlights from that game, you'll know what the word matriculate means, because he used it. Way to matriculate the ball down the field. He was a real showman, Hank Stram, and a really good guy. Dressed to the nines, insisted that his players dress anytime they went on a road trip in a Chiefs blazer. I mean, and really, I don't know what came first. Did the Chiefs dress that way to address their fans, no pun intended, or did the fans respond to the Chiefs dressing in such a business way that they came to the game in the same fashion? It's kind of interesting. But he had them dress in blazers. He wanted them to act like a team when they were traveling. And you can't fault him, because he won a championship and appeared in 2 Super Bowls. Really was probably he was helped push the AFL to be merged with the NFL. I was talking on earlier. Here's one of the myths about the NFL AFL. The merger had already been set in place by the time the Jets met the Colts, and everybody thinks that it was because of the Jets' upset win that the NFL said, we got to merge with them finally. No, that deal was done earlier, about 3-4 seasons earlier, about 66. They were going to merge. One of the big decisions they had to make, and this is interesting, one of the big decisions they had to make was, were they going to just keep all the NFL teams in one division and all the AFL teams in one division, and it would be unbalanced? Or could they take 16, they had 16 teams in the NFL. So there were 3 teams that finally volunteered. I'm sure they were compensated for it, but they volunteered to join the AFL. I got to be honest with you. Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Baltimore all joined. For Pittsburgh, it was basically a resurrection. It was like a rebirth. They were take a look. They were a new franchise, because up until 69, if you take a look at Pittsburgh's franchise history, I think they have 6 winning records in all that time. And I'm going back to the 40s. And I think one of the years was when they combined with the Eagles during the war years, and they became the Steagles. And I think they were, let's say, 6-4-2 the one year they were together. I don't even know if they played a total of 12 games that year. But the Steelers are terrible in the NFL. and moving them to the AFL almost was like a rebirth. Now, yes, three things went in there. They got Chuck Noll as their head coach, who was signed on in '69. Their first pick is Joe Green, really transforms the defense. And then the following season, they get Terry Bradshaw out of Louisiana Tech. But by 1972, they were in the playoffs. And that's the same season, 72. They do lose to the Dolphins in the championship game after defeating the Raiders in the Immaculate Reception game. So they were on their way, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76. They finally come crashing. The 74 season, they finally make the breakthrough. They get to the Super Bowl, and they win. Then they win again, beating the Cowboys. And then they win in 78 and 79, beating the Cowboys again and the LA Rams. So them moving to the AFL, put it this way, where they were really a putrid franchise when they're in the NFL, they go to the AFC, and they are one of the top teams in the history of the game now. You know, you have Steeler Nation, you have America's team. You have about 4 or 5 teams, I would say, on the in football that are followed not just by the local, not just by the region, not just by the state, but have a huge following nationwide. And the Steelers are definitely one of them, along, of course, with the Cowboys. I can't really say that about the Patriots, all right? But those two teams definitely have a huge following, along with the Packers and the Bears, because they've been such long teams in the NFL, real traditional teams of tradition. And then the Browns, of course, well, like Notre Dame, I've said on past episodes, the curse of the peacock. I've also mentioned this. I really believe the Browns got to bring back the elf, get the elf back on the shelf for them, because once they abandoned the elf about 1969, they merge with the AFL. They join the AFC. They really, I think, if I can recall off the top of my head, remember how I did that in an earlier episode? I think in the 50 years that Cleveland's been in the AFC, they've had about maybe 16 winning seasons. So they got to get back that elf. One of my favorite logos. Put it right here on their jersey. I'd buy one in a second. But Cleveland, definitely, the move over wasn't too good. They were a good team in the 60s. They were a great team in the old AAFC. They were a winning franchise in the 60s. You know, you have to think about it. You have Baltimore, Green Bay, and Cleveland really fighting for the top dog in the NFL in those 60s. And, of course, the team I just mentioned, Baltimore. Well, they come over. They win their first Super Bowl in the AFC, beating the Cowboys in the Blunder Bowl. And then, of course, they have the Burt Jones era where they get to the playoffs but really never do anything. They had a good team with Lydell Mitchell. I think they had Raymond Chester. They were just good but not great. Couldn't get over the hump. Plus, they could never, ever get past the Steelers. Then they moved to Indianapolis and, of course, get to 2 Super Bowls. So their experience in the AFC, they're right in the middle. Steelers, right up there. The Brownies are Downies. Okay? So that experience. But it really did help shape the AFC and the NFC, those guys making the move over there. And it is interesting that the two teams, the Colts and the Browns, one time played in the AAFC. That's a great trivia question now. The two teams that have played in all 3 leagues, AFC, NFL, and the AAFC. Okay, get to this. So I'm looking at that, and obviously the first Super Bowl also had the first 2 quarterbacks who would go on to the Hall of Fame who would face each other, and that was Bart Starr and Len Dawson. They faced each other. And then you're starting to think, I was thinking as I was doing this, it had to happen quite a bit. And actually, in the 50-some-odd years that the Super Bowl has been played, not as much as I thought, because, you know, one thing about the Super Bowl is that usually teams that get there repeatedly, they usually have a Hall of Fame quarterback. And when you think about it, the Super Bowl has had really periods of where certain teams have appeared in the Super Bowl. And then their franchise goes down, and then there is, a changing of the guard, etc. Well, kind of this happened. In the following year, you have the last vestiges of the Packer dynasty being shown in the Super Bowl. They win the first Super Bowl. They defeat the Cowboys in back-to-back championships, among them that ice ball game where it was 15 below, and of course, Bart Starr sneaks over. And then they go to the Super Bowl. That's 68 against Oakland. And Oakland had a guy, and I always liked him. But here is the old Kellogg's. Didn't do as good a job, I don't think, Kellogg's, with their football three-dimensional as they did with the baseball. All right. First of all, they probably didn't get permission prior to use the NFL logos for the helmets, which I always loved as a kid. Still do. But that's Daryl Lamonica. I don't know why. I always liked him. I loved his nickname. He was called the Mad Bomber. Never rooted for Oakland, but I always loved their field because they had the Raider shield that was on their helmet, and they put it on the field of play. They were one of the few teams also that I think had the 30, 35, 40, 45 marked out. So it made it easier for kids like me to follow the game, see where the ball was being placed. They were always in mud because they wet down the field, the Raiders. But Lamonica started that 68 Super Bowl. I don't know why. He was a big-time thrower. He could throw the football, but he never got the Raiders over the hump, let's say. All right. But still to this day, I always liked Daryl Lamonica. Notre Dame guy, too. But Bart Starr, Len Dawson. Then the two guys who meet next that are future Hall of Famers are Roger Stoback and Bob Griese. And, of course, Stoback leads the Cowboys back to the championship after losing the Blunder Bowl. He was not the quarterback that year in the Blunder Bowl. That was Craig Morton, who has his own little part in the Super Bowl lore, as he's one of, I think, two guys to lead two different teams to the Super Bowl. Didn't win in either respect. But I remember always reading or listening to Bob Lilly, who was so aggravated that they lost to the Colts in that crazy game. I think it was an exciting game. I know there were a ton of mistakes, but it kind of made for it's just crazy, that Colt game called the Blunder Bowl. I think there were 13 turnovers in that game. And that was the only game where the MVP came from the losing team, Chuck Howley, who had, I think, 2 turnovers or possessed 2 turnovers. One was an interception, one was a fumble. Anyway, Stoback did not play in that game. And Lilly always thought that he should have. But he does play when they play the Miami Dolphins, who are just coming into their own, right? Stoback defeats the Dolphins 24-3. That game was kind of a Boro blowout from the get-go. Really, it could be encapsulated in the one play where Griese is running around, and he's finally sacked, I think, by Bob Lilly and Jeffro Pugh for a 25-yard loss. And that kind of framed the whole game, that the Cowboys were they just couldn't wait to get their rings. And you could see the Miami was good enough to get there, but not good enough to get over the hump. They would the following 2 years. And Bob Griese would return 2 years later and 2 Super Bowls later to face Fran Tarkington, future Hall of Famer, but also unfortunately has the yoke around his neck of 3 Super Bowl losses. Bradshaw and Roger Staubach return and face each other a couple of times. So really it's 9 or 10 times here. Let me just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right. It's 10 times it actually has happened, but there was some repeats. So Bradshaw and Staubach square off. Great games. I know that the first time they squared off was the 74 season, or actually the 75 season. Nobody thought the Cowboys were going to go anywhere. Remember that they were 8-6 in 74. They are a wild card team, 10-4 in 75. They stunned the Rams in the Coliseum for the NFL championship, and then actually hold a tenuous 10-9 lead against the Steelers, and then finally succumb to them 21-17. It was a really good game. It was back and forth for the most part. But, what I do remember also about that season is that everyone laughed when Landry installed the shotgun. Everybody's laughing. But it gave Stoback time. It allowed him to see the field better. And look at what Landry wrought. Because an old style of hiking the football came back by Landry. And now it's being used by every team in every league at every level. And he was laughed at that year, I do recall. Then it was Bradshaw, as I said, Roger Stoback, and Joe Montana. It takes quite a bit of time, really, when you think about 4 or 5 seasons, Super Bowls, for Montana and Marino to hook up in their only, Marino's only appearance, but Joe Montana was Joe Cool, and San Francisco was just a buzzsaw. Marino, of course, unbelievable career. Team just wasn't good enough around him. It's a shame, but he is a Hall of Famer regardless. One of the few, when you think about it, outside of the teams that are eligible to play in the Super Bowl, it's one of the few quarterbacks without a Super Bowl ring that's in the Hall of Fame, when you think about it, along with Tarkenton. Then it's Aikman and Kelly. They square off not once but twice. And, of course, I've gone into Kelly's problems in the past here. Basically, Buffalo, really a great team, win 4 straight. Unlike the Vikings, I think there is something to be said about winning 4 straight and at least appearing in the Super Bowl 4 straight. Problem was they played the 4 Super Bowls. They played twice against the Cowboys, played the Redskins, and they played the Giants. And that NFC East, which is terrible today, was really good then. Probably from top to bottom, obviously, was the best division in all of football in the late 80s. Even though San Francisco came out of the NFC West, I don't think you would get an argument that pound for pound, that NFC East was so good. And the Eagles, during that time, would qualify for the playoffs, but they couldn't even get an edge. All right. And that Washington team, and this is why I'm bringing up Ripien. Joe Gibbs wins 3 Super Bowls and gets he gets the 4 Super Bowls and wins 3 Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks. I mean, that's got to be remarkable. And it kind of goes against what I was just saying before, that usually these teams appear and they're usually led by a future Hall of Famer. If you make numerous or multiple appearances, usually the one guy who is pretty stable is your quarterback. Joe Gibbs takes 3 different quarterbacks: Theismann, Ripien, who I just showed you, and Doug Williams, who actually became the first African-American quarterback to win a Super Bowl. 3 different quarterbacks. So that throws that whole theory out. But he was a remarkable coach. He had the Hogs, good defense, was able to plug in the quarterbacks. They did what they were supposed to do. Kudos to Gibbs. Kudos to the guys for being able to do that. I know that Ripien had a fair career. You know what? He's got one more than I do, a Super Bowl ring. So he couldn't have been that bad. So, but for the most part, I think you can see that most of these teams are going in there with at least their quarterback set. And then it's Aikman and Kelly, as I mentioned, and then John Elway and Brett Favre was the last Super Bowl with 2 future Hall of Famers. Now, look, before you jump on me, yes. Well, what about Brady? And what about Peyton Manning facing Drew Brees? I put a caveat in there. None of those are Hall of Fame quarterbacks just yet. More than likely they will be. And that's why I'm going to segue into my last thing, that you do have Brady. I can't believe this. Brady was 01, 03, 04, 14, 16, 18. He won 6 Super Bowl MVPs. Amazing. Ben Roethlisberger was the MVP and 2-time champ for the Steelers. Peyton Manning, 2 times champ with 2 different teams, a la Morton, but at least he won championships. Drew Brees wins with L.A. when they beat L.A. Wins with the Saints when they beat the Colts and Peyton Manning. So there is a Hall of Fame matchup. And then you have Aaron Rodgers and then Eli meeting a couple of times against Brady. And I think that Eli has really secured a path to the Hall of Fame just with those 2 wins against those 2 great Patriot teams. And the reason why I say that is that he had a pretty good career with the Giants. He does beat the team of football in the last 15 years or 20 years, actually. I don't think anybody could really doubt that. And he beat probably the greatest quarterback of all time, arguably, in Tom Brady, not once, but twice. I think that's enough. And then there is this guy, also a 2-time winner. And I didn't mean to segue real quick on this, but I know that time is running out. Jim Plunkett resurrected his career in Oakland with the Raiders. I always liked Plunkett, so I got to put a shout out on that. Plunkett, real quick, Heisman Trophy winner at Stanford, leads Stanford to a Rose Bowl for the first time in eons. They stun Ohio State with Plunkett. What I always thought was kind of cool as a kid was that Plunkett's parents were both blind. They were Mexican immigrants who ran like their own mom and pop store. I always thought that was kind of a cool story. And here he is at Stanford. He gets drafted along with his teammate and I believe dorm room buddy Randy Vitaha to the Patriots. But they could never find pieces around those Patriots. They struggle. He gets beat up physically at New England. Doesn't have a real great career there. They ship him off to Oakland, where he wins 2 Super Bowls. And really, when I think about it, outside of Eli, all the guys that have won multiple Super Bowls are basically in the Hall of Fame. And I really think that the writers should be thinking about Plunkett also in there. Winning 2 Super Bowls is pretty incredible. And I'm going to sign off with, without a doubt, one of my favorite Sports Illustrated covers. And this is Joe Namath the week after he wins the Super Bowl. Just always loved this SI cover. This is Will O'Toole thanking you again for joining me for another episode of Park Ridge Sports History. Bye now.